But the reality is that the tree, the stars, the galaxies, and everything else is nothing but a projection of my own consciousness as it moves, as that field moves within itself. And therefore, when I transcend in a moment of unity, when the observer, the observed, and the process of observation become one single field, then there is no separation, and thought comes to a standstill, time comes to a standstill, and then we have pierced literally the mask of mortality. Even if it is for 1 second we have gone through it, that's what is called a peak experience, or an experience of unity. Poets, philosophers, writers like Emerson, Thoreau, etc., all the great literature of the world is because somebody at one time or another had a moment of that experience. And then they spend their entire life writing about it, their entire life trying to recapitulate what happened. So, and again, in the ancient wisdom of the Veda, there's a great expression from a great seer called Vasishtha 6,000 years ago. He said, bliss is the effortless suspension of breath in the moment of unity. Bliss is the effortless suspension of breath in the moment of unity, describing the experience of transcendence, describing the experience of unity consciousness, which is our ground state. So, with all that, I would like to say that linear time also is a psychological event. When our attention shifts from linear time, instead moving our attention to experiencing cycles of rest and activity in an eternal continuum of now, then the very change in our view of time can result in a mutation in consciousness. And because consciousness is the phenomenon and the body is simply the epiphenomenon, that mutation in consciousness spontaneously causes a mutation in our physiologies. I would like to therefore present to you the new paradigm, which is based on not only the ancient wisdom of the Veda, but also based on the most modern understanding of physics and neurophysiology. The old paradigm says there's an objective world out there which is independent of a perceiver. The new paradigm says that's not the case. The objective world is a response of the observer. That in fact we are the creators of the objective world out there. Through frequencies of our own self-interaction, we create the objective world out there. This morning, I was listening to Dr. Curtis being a little critical of some very rigidly dogmatic, ideological schools of thought in some of the more fundamental religions. And I couldn't agree with him more. In fact, I was reminded of a dialogue, I told him this joke this morning, of a discussion between a fundamentalist and what we call in the tradition of Ayurveda a Vedantist. And the two were having a discussion between themselves, and the fundamentalist, after a while, he said to the Vedantist, he said, "It seems to me like you are an atheist." And the Vedantist said, "I used to be one till I realized I was God." And of course, this was very shocking to the fundamentalist. He said, "Are you denying the divinity of Christ?" And the Vedantist said, "Heavens, I never denied anybody's divinity. Why should I deny Christ's divinity?" So that's the basic difference between the old paradigm and the new paradigm. The new paradigm says that objective worth, and again there's a beautiful expression from an old Vedic text. A disciple and his spiritual master are sitting together, and the disciple says to the spiritual master, he says, "Do we live in the same world? You seem to live in a completely different world than I. So do we live in the same world?" And the master says, "Of course we live in the same world. The only difference is you see yourself in the world, and I see the whole world in myself." And that's the slight perceptual shift you need to make from object referral to self-referral. Interacting with my own self, curving back within myself, I create again and again and again. The old paradigm says that the world is made up of matter contained in space, existing in time, the new paradigm says the essential nature of the world is that it is non-material. The old paradigm says mind and matter are different and independent entities. The new paradigm says they are essentially the same. The field experienced subjectively is the mind. The field experienced subjectively is the mind. The field experienced objectively is the physical universe. But actually that field is who I am. In fact, again, from the ancient writings of Yoga Vasishtha, the seer Vasishtha, he said, I interact with myself and I experience myself as the mind, subjectively. I interact with myself and I experience myself as the world, objectively. But in fact, there's nothing other than myself. I am that, you are that, all this is that, and that's all there is. The old paradigm says that the mind is trapped in the brain, it's local. The new paradigm says non-local, means it's everywhere, all at the same time. And by that non-locality is a very comfortable term for scientists who shy away from terms like omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, but it means the same thing. The old paradigm says consciousness is the epiphenomenon of matter. Physical molecules produce thought. The new paradigm says it's the other way around. Matter is the epiphenomenon of consciousness. Thought, feelings, emotions, desires, instincts, drives, these are the ones that produce the physical molecules. The old paradigm says human beings are self-contained, independent entities, and the new paradigm says we are inseparably interconnected with each other and with also everything else in the universe. In fact, we are holographic focal points in the unified field. Now this is a slightly difficult concept to explain, so just bear with me for 1 minute. Most of you perhaps even know about it, but if you've seen a hologram in Disney World or the Science Museum, you'll know that a hologram is a three-dimensional picture of an object that looks exactly like the original. So for example, if you had a hologram of me right now giving a lecture and you had some special audio equipment, you wouldn't really be able to tell the difference between me and my hologram. You could walk around it, etc. It's a sculpture made out of light. And if you even came close to it, if it was well made, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. The only thing is, if you tried to walk through it, you would be able to do that because it's made out of light. It's a three-dimensional sculpture of light. Now, how does a hologram come about? A hologram comes about by the following experiment. You take a laser beam, which is a beam which has only one frequency of light. You put it through something, an instrument called a beam splitter, and it splits into two beams. One's called an object beam, one's called a reference beam. The object beam hits the object, in this case, let's say me. Reference beam bumps off a mirror, and then comes and interferes with the object beam and creates what is called an interference pattern. And you can record that interference pattern on a photographic plate. And when you look at that photographic plate, all you see is a bunch of wiggles and squiggles. But now the magic starts. You take this holographic plate and you put a laser beam through it, and suddenly you get a three-dimensional image of the original object. And that three-dimensional image is just like the original object. It is the original object in a sense. Now, what is so remarkable about holograms is that you cannot destroy them. You take this piece of photographic plate, you take a scissors and you cut it up into 1 billion bits, or 1 trillion bits, or 1 trillion bits. You take the smallest bit that you can think of, put a laser beam through it, and you get a three-dimensional picture of me all over again. So the reason it's called a hologram is the whole is contained in every part. That's why it's called a hologram. The man who developed it, he also won the Nobel Prize in Physics. Now science is showing that our bodies are holograms of the whole universe. In every cell of us is the entire information of all that exists in this universe.